Welcome back to yet another episode of your Re-Educated podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Sangeeta Isvaran. She is the founder of the Wind Dancers Trust and is a dancer performer who developed the Katradi method, working in marginalized, underprivileged communities using the arts in education, empowerment, and conflict resolution across 30 countries. I'm really excited for this conversation today. How are you doing?
Hey Gautam, I'm doing good. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation. And we were just talking about it, but I had run across you and your workshop when I was working in Gudalur, and I came to the One All, which was the ultimate frisbee camp. And for that week, what they were focusing on was sexual health education. And you're leading this amazing workshop, and I fell in love with all that you were teaching and the way you had approached it. And I had to contrast it with my own sexual health education. And it was so vastly different. And that's why I'm like, I have to get your voice and opinion on this, because I think some of the practices that you do, had it been applied on a larger scale in my education, I think it would have been massively helpful in getting through puberty and even understanding a lot of who I am, what is sexuality, what is your relationship with some of these things. And so I'm really excited to get into today. So I guess my first question for you is, what is your story? I'd love to know a little bit more about you that helped you become the person that you are and get interested in working in these spaces.
I'm basically a Bharatanatyam dancer. That's a kind of a dance theater form from Tamil Nadu, the state I live in India, and it's 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 a path. It's an art form that's very deep, and I had the joy and the the good fortune to have an amazing teacher, Kalanidhi Narayanan and Savitri Jagannath Rao, two of them actually. And most of my childhood was spent dancing, but um, I actually danced on a within quotes professional stage only at the age of 18 or 19. I danced a lot before that, but my teacher and my mom would take us to dance in old age homes, orphanages. We would dance in temples. So we danced in more social spaces, not necessarily exclusively artistic spaces. And so when I decided to take up dancing as a career, uh, um, it was none of my family or my friends are very happy about that, because being a dancer basically means you're not successful. But I still wanted to do that. But I quickly realized that I just didn't want to be only a performer. I love dancing and I love performing, but I could feel the power of the arts in multiple spaces. And I was lucky enough to volunteer. I mean, throughout my 20s, wherever I would go to perform, like I would get a grant to go to Cambodia or Thailand or Indonesia to study their art forms. But I would also volunteer. I would volunteer to work with sex workers, with street kids, with landmine victims, working in tandem with photographers or with other dancers or theater people. And the entire decade was filled with multiple experiences, because I was really yearning to see how art can transform.
Mm.
My youngest memory is feeling the barrier. I used to get a, I had, I have a, but I've had a lot of trouble with depression. Every decade I go through these cycles of depression because of the state of the world and a lot of existential angst. Maybe why are things the way they are? Why do we kill each other? Why is there so much suffering? And dance theater art always soothes me and helped me connect with people in a much more profound level, and not just on stage. So I started building modules. Like I worked with survivors of AIDS in Cambodia who had no access to medication, which meant they were essentially living the last few years of their life. And it's a very profound experience to work with such marginalized communities. And I found that the arts were way more than just entertainment. There's this saying in Natya Shastra, as one of the texts that inform Bharatanatyam. It's supposed to be more than 2,000 years old. It says art is meant to educate the and no, I got it wrong. It's meant to entertain the enlightened, and I'm missing it. Sorry. It's basically not just for entertainment, but it's also for education, and it's for suffering and solace, healing.
Mm,
So this is what I try to apply in my life, and yeah, that's been the journey. And it's been a couple of decades of doing that, and there's just so much more that one needs to do.
mm. I mean, thank you for sharing that. First of all, I think it's can be very hard, especially on a platform like a podcast, to like sometimes be honest about our lives and to share vulnerably. So thank you. I really appreciate that. And you know, it's interesting because I love dancing and I grew up singing a little bit, not great, but I've talked about this so many times on this podcast that my last teacher, the thing that I think he did most phenomenally is he helped me understand, I think, and walk through the journey of understanding that you don't have to be good necessarily. I mean, what does it really mean to be good? If you are enjoying yourself singing in your room and finding your voice and finding peace within yourself, is that not good enough? I mean, do you need to get an Oscar? Do you need to sing at concerts and have everyone tell you how great of a singer you are? And I think the self exploration part of art, which is not just the entertainment part, is something that's often not talked about. And so, my question for you is, what do you think it is specifically about expressing yourself through some of these creative mediums that allows the person to heal in that way?
So I think that the art in India, at least, the whole concept of the art is to produce rasa. And rasa is this amazing philosophy, right? It's this philosophy where you you through art you connect with yourself, you connect with the spectator or with the audience, and you connect with the universe. And that is why you do art, whether it's visual arts, whether it's sculpture, whether it is dance, it's theater, it's music, it doesn't matter. The goal in Indian traditional Indian art forms, the main goal is to connect, right? And so I've used the rasa theory in multiple ways because I feel this theory carries a whole bunch of pedagogies which make communication more intense and more empathetic, and this is something we need desperately in the education system in India. And like you said, right, why are we so external oriented? Like you said, why can't we just sing for ourselves? Yes, of course, we want to communicate the joy and the love we have or the emotions we have when we are singing, but can we make the process non-transactional? Because rasa can be achieved only when you go into this non-transactional space. If you're trying to calculate, this judge or this member of the audience wants this from
Hmm.
me, and I have to give them what they want, then you immediately lose your truth. But if this is who you are at this point, and that is what you're trying to express, then you live your truth, and that art at that moment just shines. And the rasa is
Hmm.
pure because you are living in the moment. And this is called manodharma. So I use the principle of manodharma extensively in my work in education. And when I teach teachers, for example, I do training of trainers. I tell them, you go in with your module, you go in with the lesson plan, you go in with your curriculum, right? But you have to be in the moment, and you have to look at your students and see, what do you need today? What do they need today? Both of you, right?
Hmm.
And you make the process cyclic. In India, we work cyclically. We don't have a linear progression. We don't think in art, at least, you don't think in the terms of a linear progression. Like you go one,
Oh.
two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, and one. You always come to the summum, right? The sum, the one, and you try to cycle through the cycle of eight or a cycle of three. You're always cycling through the rhythm because you know the one will have to come again. And that one is your center point. You're checking in with yourself on that one as an artist. So teaching and performing are not that different, especially when you're looking at how do you work with kids on sex ed or sex abuse education or taboo topics like menstruation. Anything to do with the reproductive organs is taboo in India, and not just India. When you were saying that you wish you had been taught sex ed better, I'm assuming you grew up in the US. I find that funny because in India we have this impression that the US or France, I work a lot in France, They have like the open society, the level of shame is much less, the level of information is much more, right to education, etc. So I was really amused when you said that you could have also accessed sex education in a better way, which is true, because we have so much of shame
Yes.
and guilt and ickiness. We just, even teachers don't want to talk about it. So when they're talking to kids, they're not communicating knowledge about a reproductive system. What they're communicating is ickiness, that I don't want to talk about this.
Mm,
I find it extremely embarrassing. I'm not going to make eye contact. I'm going to give you the information in the least amount of time and I'm going to leave, right? Rather than making it like another class, whether you're talking about how the heart works, for example, a biology class. Why is talking about sex any different,
mm.
right? So, which
Who-
is why laying the space to break that shame is so important, because kids are absorbing your feelings, they're not absorbing information. Only 20% is what comes out of your mouth, 80% is how you stand, how you move, whether you're making eye contact.
Mm. Wow. I think, as you're speaking, it's evoking a lot of feelings for me as well because I'm connecting. Yeah, I've never like learned to dance, but I dance so much and I find so much joy in it. And I think part of that joy comes from the breaking of a lot of shame that I have built over my life towards my own body, right? Of this looks like this isn't strong enough. I could have worked this better. But through the
Yep,
medium of dancing, I think all of those voices just silence and you become just one with your body and you love your body. And that is how the body is motivated to move. And
yep,
I think that's why there's so much interconnection between the shame that exists when talking about sexuality and the shame that exists in one's own body that gets relieved when moving. And so, my question for you is where do you think this shame comes from? And especially in India, I know a lot of people speak that, and I'm not sure how true this is. I'm very curious to hear your opinion, but people say that it wasn't always like that, where it wasn't always a country where, sex was necessarily looked like there wasn't a lot of taboo around it always. I mean, with a lot of the temples having, like figurines of people in different form, and so what are your thoughts on that? Where did that come from, that tabooness?
I have a feeling this is a myth. We love saying that only with colonialism, with the British and the French coming to India, first the Dutch, of course, that we became prudish and Indians were very free sexually before that. Yes, our temples do carry all these amazing sculptures, but it's sort of like sex is for the gods. People don't do it. It's like it's all okay if it's in Sanskrit, but not in your regular language. So I'm not sure. I can't speak with any authority what society was like 200 or 300 years ago, but I can speak with a fair amount of authority just thinking of my grandmother, my great grandmother, or parents and grandparents, great grandparents in that generation. And we live in extremely two things: an extremely repressed society, right? And repressed to the point that we don't even know the names of our private parts. Most of the women I work with, the guys will know because the guys do their own talking, but women are supposed to be chaste and modest, and they won't even know the names of the private parts, not even the bad words within quotes. They're not bad words. Humans have made all of our private parts into bad words. They don't even know the normal words, like to say penis or vagina. In Tamil it is aanurupu and pennurupu. They wouldn't even know those words, right? We have that level of repression. And the second is the level of patriarchy. And when I say patriarchy, all of us contribute to patriarchy. It's not just men who carry patriarchy. Women enforce patriarchy too. Mothers who refuse to tell their children about their periods and who throw their kids out or, put them in a corner during their period because they're dirty. And they continue this notion of dirtiness and impurity, associated with the periods. Mothers do it. Dads don't do it, right? So all this repression couched in patriarchy and submissive, modest, so-called modest and chaste behaviors are incredibly toxic. I can't tell you to what level it is toxic. So let's look at it. Just one small example. The most important relationship in India, the longest relationship you usually have is with your spouse. this is true most probably across the world, but I'm speaking now only about India, right? With authority, I can speak only about my culture. So for Tamil people, you get married pretty young if you're from the village, anything between 16, 18, 19. And if you're in a city, 23. Some women, a very, very, very small fraction of women who live in urban and have Western lifestyles, urban Western, frameworks, they get married maybe later, after 30 is very uncommon, right? So your maximum amount of time is spent with your partner. And this partner is usually an arranged marriage. Again, 95% of marriages in India are arranged because people want you to marry within your community, within your caste, within your religion, right? And women usually go into this marriage with zero preparation or understanding of what sex is. And so your husband is essentially a rapist. And this is the person you're supposed to build a lasting relationship with. I have worked in communities where 100%, like I would do a show of hands. How many of you knew about sex before you got married? And you have your eyes shut so they know that nobody's watching them, so they can lift their hand or not, right? Many of them spoke about how shocked they were to find out what sex is on their
Wow.
marriage night, right? They don't even
Wow.
know the biology of it, like what goes into what, and the pain because they have zero pleasure from it. And the man doesn't know what to do either. Right? It's not like he has had any sex education. He might have watched maybe at the most porn, and porn is not a real life experience of what sex is. They don't speak about it, so they can't tell each other what feels good and what feels bad, right? And this
Mm.
is the person you have the most important relationship with through your life, and every night is hell. And this is not
Wow.
just one woman who's talked to me about this. It's multiple women. It's hundreds of women who've spoken to me about this. Okay? And this is just one example of systemic repression that leads to such mental health issues, sexual health issues, and relationship issues.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, contextually, it's very different in that sense. Um, and so, okay, so I'm curious. So, when you think about something like this, what is the first step? How do you go about remedying some of this? And where does it start?
So the first thing you need to do is just pump the space with positivity, with laughter, and with a lot of love.
Mm,
So we dance madly, by the way. We run about, we play games, and then you have all this, you build a space of trust. And then we have this ridiculous, naming the body game, for example. In India, most groups have at least 3 or 4 languages in them because when people come from different spaces. So I'll say like how many languages in the room, and then I start pointing to my head, to my nose, to my eyes, and everybody's calling out names in their language. It's beautiful. And then when I suddenly put my hands on my breasts, there is complete silence because nobody wants to say breast. So someone will timidly say chest. I'm like, that is chest is a neutral word, but what the hell is this thing that feeds babies? And they're like, ha 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 ha. Everybody's like giggling and putting their eyes down, and it's ridiculous. So I'm like, breasts. And in Tamil, it's mulehal, for example, right? Or stanam in sthan in Hindi, for example. And then I come down to my private parts, and I'm like, what is this in English? They're all very happy, for example, to say words in English. If I point to my butt, and then they're like buttocks, and I have heard the word buttocks in like 20 different accents because they're comfortable with the English word,
right.
but they're not comfortable with the local Indian word because it's a bad word. Then people are
Mm.
rolling on the ground laughing because I'm like, you have to shout the word out, own it. And they're screaming all these words out like lings and yoni and they're growing red. And the first time I did it in a dorm room, some of the boys fell off the top bunk. I'm like, so what is this? And I pointed to their private part. And then he's like, he just fell off the bed because he was so he was like, oh my God, what is this woman doing? It's just this stupid secrecy around it. And what does the secrecy lead to? It leads to abuse. If a child is touched on their privates, they don't have a word to say. If someone slaps you on the shoulder, they may go running to their mother and say, Amma, they hit me on the shoulder. If someone touches you, you already know by the time you're 1.5 and 2 because people are saying chi chi, they're saying put your pants on, they're saying shame, shame, right? You already know that something's shameful. So if someone touches you there or treats you badly, sexually abuses you, one, you already at the tender age of 1, 2, or 3, you know that this is a shameful part. And the second thing is you don't have a word. You can't say if your mother says, "Where does it hurt?" Where do you say? Where do you say it
Mm.
hurts? You don't have a word for it, right? So people say "tingy" or your where you pee, or they say they have these ridiculous pet names for it. Why can't we just say penis and vagina, or whatever the local, you know dignified ways of teaching a child, this is your hand, this is your nose, and this is your vagina, right? So kids know
Hmm.
that they can come and tell their mom if someone touches them or treats them in a bad way. So that is one issue of all this shame. The second is just unhealthy relationships. Men and women don't have friendships because there's so much of awkwardness around it. There's so much separation. There's this big mythology that, if you're a good girl, you don't talk to boys. It's so endemic in India. Everywhere you find this. And then suddenly after school, they're just shoved into this multi-gendered workspace. And then you have all kinds of abuse popping up, and nobody has any strategies or any life skills to deal with it. It just
Hmm.
contributes to unhappiness. Fundamentally, there's so much suffering around it. And the most important thing is health. I mean, there is enough statistics to show that women, because they don't report issues around their periods, or lumps in their private areas, it goes to the level of stage 4 cervical cancer before they even report, right?
Hmm.
All reproductive cancers go undetected because women just don't report. So for multiple reasons, we call this Besharam. Besharam is be shameless. Be shameless about your body. Love your body
Hmm.
for what it is. And in many spaces when I used to do these sessions, I would really be worried that the teachers and the principals or the adults in the community would start looking at me. I'm single. If I'm single, the mythology is that I have to be chaste, and I am supposed to behave as a single woman in a modest and chaste manner. So, and here I am jumping about and talking about sex and talking about their private parts, naming them loudly, and I'm wondering if I'm going to get thrown out of the school or out of the community. When I was much younger and trying to start this initiative. But the sad part is this: not once, believe me, not once have I been thrown out. Instead, at the
Hmm.
end of a session, the teacher would call me and say, you know what, it's been 20 years I've been married and I still have pain during sex. Because she's still
Wow.
dry. So I would be doing a session on masturbation on the phone with her, just to tell her, you need to figure out what gives you pleasure. You need to talk to your husband
Hmm.
about it. After 20 years, if you still have pain, there's something wrong, right? And it's she's dreading it. So I get calls all the time from the adults and from people in the community saying I have this issue, because this is the first time someone has talked about it, and talked about it in an open, non-judgmental, loving, funny way. I hug people massively. I mean, with consent. I don't randomly hug people if they don't want to be hugged. But the whole point is to reassure, to say that, the touch is about, I'm here. You can tell me anything you want, and I'm not going to judge you for it.
Hmm.
And honestly, not once have I been creeped out as well. You would think that all the creeps would come and start trying to make you uncomfortable, asking you these weird questions, but it's not true. People, for the first time, have a space to talk about this stuff.
Hmm.
And I've done this in the police force. I've done these sessions for communities, like you saw in Gudalur. I've done these sessions in tribal areas. I've done these sessions in refugee camps. I've done these sessions in schools, obviously, in street children's homes and orphanages, old age homes, because so many of the women who've come to that age have come through a lot of abuse too. And it's just sad. I kind of am writing this book called The Reluctant Sex Educator, because I never dreamt of being a sex educator. That wasn't my life goal when I was young, right? I just fell into it because there was a need for it. And among all the other modules, this is one of the modules that I conduct. But there's just been so much learning around shame around the body. And those learnings are now affecting all the other education I do. Because I've just realized, when people are feeling shameful, when they are being in the state of inhibition, that is not it's not a logical rational inhibition, right? It's affecting the way your body moves completely.
Hmm.
So a lot of the work I do is physical. It does not even go to the source of shame or the topic. It just works on the body first, to center, to open, to roll about, to reclaim your space. Okay,
Wow.
I'm talking too much.
No, no. The hard thing about running a podcast is sometimes I just don't want to say anything. I just want to like sit there in silence and just like think a bit more about what you say before I continue. But I know that's also taboo. You're supposed to kind of have a question ready. But I mean, I think
No, no.
There is
There's
so
no
much
balance.
about there's so much about what you just said. I mean, I truly want to sit on that and the power of shame. And so one thing I want to touch on is because I think perhaps I'm really curious to understand what your experiences are. You said you worked in French schools as well, and with
Mhm.
um, people in France, and so I'm very curious what some of the differences in tabooness are compared to the environments you work in there versus the environments that you work in India.
So yeah, when I work in France, I don't work with French people. I work in refugee spaces. So I'm
Okay.
working with women and children from, let's say, Iraq or Afghanistan, Pakistan, North Africa, West Africa, you know, and yeah, a whole range of communities. And I also among them, because these are spaces where you're integrating local populations. You also have French people, you know, and I have to say that sometimes and I like, for example, I do sessions. I've presented workshops and conferences in the UK or the US, where I do these games and just to present the work I do. And the first time I did it, I was like, what are these? Why do these guys need it? You guys already have this awareness of LGBTQA. You already have so much of work around, destigmatizing sexuality and, stuff like that. And I was really surprised to see how many facilitators came up to me and said, we want these games. We want to do this for the children. Just like you said, we want to do it with our kids because we don't have fun ways of talking about sex and sexuality. Meaning, the biology of sex takes 2 minutes. How much you want to say? Penis, vagina, penetration, this is how babies are made. It just takes 2 minutes to talk about how
Yeah.
babies are made. It's not like rocket science. You don't need a PhD to do that, right? And it takes another 2 minutes to talk about safe sex. There's spreading of disease, pregnancy. This is a condom. This is a banana. Put it down, and you're safe. But that is not sex education. Sex education is discovering about yourself, discovering consent, discovering,
Mm,
what your limits are, discovering respect, talking about emotions is so important and central to it. And then talking about shame, right? Slut shaming, body shaming, I'm not good enough. I need to know 20 different positions before I can be worthy of having a boyfriend. I mean, it's ridiculous some of the questions kids came up with. I did a couple of workshops with teenagers in the UK, and I was like, what? you know, it was so hilarious because I went in thinking, what am I going to do with these kids? And I was like, because the creation of the space, I create an open space. We're all playing madly, we're rolling about, we're doing a lot of de-inhibition. And then I just present some of the work around the games that talk about sex and stuff. And then I ask them because naming the body doesn't make any sense. They all know how to name their body parts. It's not a problem. But the questions, oh my God, I can just write an entire book on the funniest questions I have had across the world. In
mm,
Brazil, in Mexico, I had to learn them in Portuguese and in Spanish and in French because kids just they had the darndest questions. How many times, for example, a very common question among teenagers, boys, which they cannot ask and they have nobody to ask is it okay? How many times a week should I masturbate? I
mm,
have hundreds of teens across the world asking me this question in every session. Because whom do they ask this question? If they ask their friends, they're going to be laughed at. There is no website that says how many times a week. The answer is there is no number. It's not like there's a golden number. You can masturbate 10 times, 5 times, or 2 times a week, right? In India, it's a loaded question because a lot of communities believe in, the sacred sperm and absolute bullshit like that. So you're not supposed, masturbation is considered a sin, in several communities. So that is a different problem. But even in regular English and French communities, Brazilian communities, I have boys asking me this question. And in Goodlore, incidentally, one of the men asked me that question immediately. That's the first question that came up because they just don't know, right? So just to tell you that there is no space for kids to ask questions. What they
yeah.
do have access to is a lot of porn websites. And porn, I don't know. There's supposedly good porn and bad porn. There's a whole. I mean, I have a friend who's studying porn, the whole culture of porn, and she's trying to do a crash course for me because porn addiction is a real thing in India, and a lot of violence stems from porn too, because the porn many boys have access to is oftentimes very, very violent, and that is not reality, right? So I don't know if that's the best way to learn about stuff. Why can't there be a teacher in your school to whom you could ask all these questions? And what do kids who are in this, who are differently gendered do? Who's a safe person to ask these questions to, right?
Mm.
If they're lucky, they have a parent or a teacher, but mostly kids don't, and they grow up with really sad inhibitions. They have to reach 40 or 45 before they are comfortable in their skin.
Mm. I think this space that you're talking about is, and I just want to speak a little bit about my own experience in
Mm.
coming and attending your workshop and just being there, is there's something about the way you create that space that feels so non-judgmental, where you really can say what you want, whether it's opening up things that have happened in your past, whether it's saying things you're scared of, that allows people to be free. And that's like such a difficult thing because that relies heavily on the facilitator, because that a lot of that is due to the way you're able to make people feel about themselves, how you're able to pay attention and listen and make someone feel like they're not wrong or bad no matter what they may have done or gone through. And I think that's really difficult to also just create within yourself to be able to provide that space. So one thing I have to understand is, what was your process to become the person that you are today, where you're able to listen and create that space? And what are some tips and techniques that perhaps you could give to others so they can start to pay attention more to those things so that they themselves can, create those spaces?
There is no magic formula. Most good facilitators have, you know, have to have a few qualities. One is you have to be non-judgmental yourself. You have to work on your own biases all the time. Like I'm watching myself when I say something, like, oh, and suddenly I realize later, oh my God, that was such a biased things to say. I have to watch myself and keep myself as open as possible, right? We always talk about right thought, right speech, and right action, right? And a lot of that I do in my meditation. I have a very strong meditation practice where I try to. We tend to think that a good facilitator is someone who knows the material, right? Who has the content, who has the way, has theatrical skills and communication skills to deliver that content. But the most important things are the subliminal stuff. We all have fundamental biases and fundamental beliefs, right? For example, I fundamentally believe in love. I feel that any space that's infused with love, and if I can generate the maximum amount of love, if I can look at people in the eye, smile at them, and make them feel like, you know what, I'm here because I care. And I
Hmm.
openly say it. I openly say it, not in the first class because it's weird if a facilitator comes and says, I love you. But I just finished a workshop over 8 weekends in Musiri. It's in Trichy. It's with 88 girls who are in a home because their own homes are too filled with abuse. So now they are in this home, right? It's not like they don't have parents. You can't call them orphans, but essentially they are orphaned. They don't have a home to go back to, right? And in the second last session, I sat with them and said, why we are here? And the main reason we are here is because we love you. We want to be here with you. I don't even know you. I've gotten to know you a little bit over the last 4 weeks and months. But that's not the point. The point is I'm here because I care and you can tell me anything you want. Right?
Hmm.
It's such an important thing to state in the space once things are comfortable and people have loosened up, not right at the beginning because it's weird. So these are some of the fundamental things. Non-transaction. I don't expect anything in return. Nothing. I don't expect the child to respond in a particular way. I don't expect the NGO to pay me in a particular way or the community to do this for me. I have to train myself in non-expectation and even expectation of myself. If I'm very harsh and judgmental on myself, it's going to be a problem, right? So there's this
Hmm.
fine line you have to do where you can't obviously be a complete, shit, and you can't just go in unprepared, but you have to go in with an extremely open and compassionate heart. And that for me is the core. And you have to work at it every single day. when you feel the anger rising, because sometimes people are trying to get a rise out of you. There'll be men in the community who drink and come and make a fuss, who can try to come and beat up the women in the workshop, for example. There would be others who are trying to get a rise out of you. Who's this woman? Why is she here? She's taking some of our power away, right? And I'm constantly watching myself. And when I feel the heat of anger, even before the anger manifests, I step back and take a breath. That's because of years of watching myself and watching my emotion and centering. It helps no one if I lose my shit, if I get angry, and if I start, if someone is yelling at me in the community. I've had people attacking me in the community sometimes because I'm working with women who are considered sex workers or shit or caste wise, they've been what do you call it, put out of the community, and people are angry that I'm coming and giving them resources, right?
Hmm.
Always stop and say, as long as you're screaming at me, I'm not going to talk to you. You stop screaming, and then we can have a conversation. Till then, no. And you walk away, because you screaming back doesn't help. Someone's beating a child, it doesn't help to beat them. You need to keep your calm, keep your center. And this is the hardest part, and I've only managed in the last couple of years. You need to care for the abuser as well. See, in
Hmm.
India, most of the women, literally, I mean, it's a very sad truth. 99.99% of the women I work with, there is domestic violence at home. They've been beaten at some point, even in happy marriages, because the fundamental belief is that you're the property of the man and he can hit you if you do something wrong. If he's not having a good day, he can hit you. If he's drunk, he can hit you. And you have to bear it. Kallanalum kanavan pullanalum purushan. Even if he's a stone, he's your husband. If he's like, completely rigid, he's your husband. Even if he's like flaky like glass, he's still your husband. You just have to put up with this shit. There is no question of divorce. There is no question of separation. So in that scenario, I need to work with both of them to understand, make them understand that the suffering that they're going through, he's not happy either. You think he's happy? If he's drinking and beating his wife, is he happy? No. I don't have sympathy for his drinking and beating, but I know that the easiest way to get to a solution is to work with him, because she
Hmm.
cannot leave him. At least by her tenets, she cannot leave him. And I am nobody. I can't impose that on her. I can't just tell her, you know what, I have a great lawyer, pro bono, I can get you a divorce. That would be my easiest option, right? I keep telling them, why do you put up with this shit? But a divorce is excommunication. They will be completely thrown out of the entire web of community that gives them their support, right? So working with abusers is something I have trained myself to do. And it's not that hard. In one sense, we are all perpetrators. We are enablers of abuse in so many ways. And I'm constantly watching myself. And I constantly have to do this practice of forgiving myself, because I make mistakes too. But yeah, it's not easy. Sometimes I'm just very tired and I'm
Yeah.
very disgusted by how easy it is to inflict suffering. But people who are in pain inflict pain. That's what they do best.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you that next because one of my really close friends is a child psychiatrist. And so he just works with children who are suffering a lot from different mental illnesses. And
Mm-hmm.
so one thing I'm always curious about, I feel like for people who are constantly interacting with people that are going through a lot of pain in different parts of their lives is how do you separate what you do from your work from yourself so that you can protect your own space and energy so you can continue to do this time and time again where it doesn't overwhelm you?
So when I was younger, I was overwhelmed. And there were times, like I said, I would have cycles of depression. I would do very difficult conflict work, let's say with Christian Muslim conflict in Indonesia, lots of killing, lots of violence, people just killing each other in the name of God. I mean, in India, caste violence, religion violence. And I would just come back home just disgusted with humanity. Why are we even around? Just maybe we just should have another meteorite, and boom, like the dinosaurs, we are out. Then the Earth has a better deal after that. But after a lot, like decades of inner work, one thing I've learned is I don't compartmentalize. Compartmentalization, where your work is separate from your life, in a sense, for me feels false. It feels false because you're trying to erect a wall And the wall is actually a source of pain.
Mm.
Rather than that, you have to let it permeate you, and you have to figure out how you can accept what you cannot change. You know that very famous. There's a very famous proverb: "Accept what you cannot change, and do what you can to change the things you can, and to know the difference. What do you accept, and where do you act?" Right? And that's a very fine line. But I'm working on acceptance a lot. And again, I do a lot of meditation, and Buddhist and Hindu philosophy does talk about suffering is the baseline. Life is about suffering. We all suffer in many ways, whether you're rich or you're poor. All of us suffer, whatever color we are, and all of us inflict suffering as well, right? So very often, that's why when I talk about Katradi method, we talk about 5 levels of communication or of interaction. It's not just the rational level. Explaining to someone that his alcoholism is ruining his life, and it's causing this stuff in his brain, his liver is going. Explaining to them intellectually literally has zero effect, right?
Mm.
What we need to do is address on the physical level, address on the emotional level. So we have physical, emotional, sensory, intellectual, and intuitive. These 5 levels, you need to talk about any problem, whether it's violence, whether it's alcoholism, whether it is stigma around periods. You can't address the shame around periods or shame around sex just intellectually. Why, you guys? It's something natural. What's the big deal? Why are you guys making such a big thing in your head? You need to physically make them roll on the floor. Make them do, like women are rolling or running after decades. Women stop running at the age of 10. Girls don't run anymore, right? You never roll on the floor unless you're in the temple and you're doing some kind of a puja for somebody's health, right? So you're doing things physically to break the inhibition. You're making eye contact. There are lots of women don't make eye contact. They have a level of modesty where your eyes are always down. They come up a little and they go up and down, right? They don't make eye contact. So you're working on a sensory level. You're working on an emotional level. You're working on intellectual level. Of course, we have discussions around what are women's rights, and why do you feel that you're lesser than a man? Why do you treat your daughters lesser than your son? Right? And then, of course, and the most important thing that I've learned to privilege more and more in the last 5 years, especially, is the intuitive level. You can call it the spiritual level, you can call it the intuitive level, you can call it whatever you want. But there is a level of understanding that goes beyond logic, right? When
Mm.
you're dealing with suffering, for example, you do a simple body scan, and I ask them, where is the pain, right? Many of them have headaches or neck aches or backache. The pain is immediately localized in the body. Your body and your mind aren't separated. Then how do you breathe to relax that pain? Can holding hands during a meditation and circulating that energy, does it help? It does. It is amazingly effective to do circles like that. There are so many strategies you can do to alleviate suffering so that people feel a temporary release. They go out, and in the next class, we discuss how can we be free of suffering? Can our happiness depend only on ourselves? And the answer is obviously yes. Your happiness lies with you. My happiness lies with me. I can't force you to be happy. I can't force you to be sad. If I slap you, you can choose to be unhappy about it. You can choose to let that pain, physical or emotional, affect you. But there is also a choice to turn away from suffering. It's not easy, right? It's not easy for anybody to turn away from suffering. But there are ways in which, especially in the kind of meditation I'm studying, there are ways in which you can train your body to lean towards happiness, to lean towards spaces that you deem are safe for you and that you can create by yourself. If I can create a safe space for you guys, okay, great. But then you depend on me. What happens if I can't come? My father's sick now. I haven't gone back to my
Mm.
village in 2 months. Then what happens? You start becoming, my the facilitators in my village have stepped up so well. We have 4 amazing women that are just carrying on the work. I just feel completely superfluous right now, and I'm just feeling great about it. I'm like, yay, nobody needs me, right? So there's so many ways in which you have to address any issue, and the deepest is learning that your happiness lies with you, and learning not to make others suffer. Women who are beaten by their husbands beat their children. It's true. because
Hmm.
I had a woman come to complain to. She came with her children and said, "Oh, my husband's beating me, and you need to come and mediate." Blah blah blah. Then after 1 hour, and she's crying, and her face is swollen. One of the kids says, "But you beat me yesterday, Amma." So I looked at her. I said, "What?" And she said, "Yeah, but he was behaving so badly." I said, "Didn't your husband say that to you?" We perpetuated, right? And then she was like, "Oh my God, why are my kids, shaming me?" I said, "Don't blame them. It's okay. Don't worry about it." And we had a nice, we kind of brought the situation down. But she was doing the same thing that her husband was doing to her,
Hmm.
you know? And that's what we do. You make me unhappy. I make a next person unhappy. That person makes the next person unhappy. And it just goes round and round and round. But the good thing is we can do that for the happiness too. You know, you
Hmm.
make me happy, then I smile, I make two more people happy, and then they smile, and they make others happy. It's ridiculous sometimes how simple it is, but what it takes is practice. You need to sit for that 10 minutes in a day, focus on that space that makes you happy, build that home within you, and the minute
Hmm.
you're struck by life's, things happen. You get hit by a truck, or your father falls sick, like in my case, or something happens. You don't start building your safe space at that point because you're already stretched. You need to do it when you're happy.
Hmm.
When you're feeling centered, you build that happy space within you.
Wow.
Where you build your conviction that you're worthy of love. You build your conviction that you can spread love. You build your conviction that there is this core that will not disappear, that will stay with me in the darkest of times.
Hmm. And so for
And now you
you,
tell me, no, no, you think this is necessary for the richest person and the poorest person, the most powerful person, the least powerful person? Everybody needs this.
yeah, yeah, 100%. And so for you, when you're developing on building this space, is that primarily through dance and through meditation? And what types
Yoga.
of things do you do to build that space for yourself?
You're talking about the work I do on myself personally, or the work I do in workshops?
For yourself personally.
Like I said, I do a lot of meditation.
Hmm.
At least once a year, I do a 10-day retreat. It's a completely silent retreat. Normally, it's in a Vipassana center. Um, and that's the first time, like 10 years ago, when I did this kind of meditation. That's the first time I understood a level of happiness which had nothing to do with the state of my mind, right?
Hmm.
Like, as in the rational or emotional state of my mind. There's this deep subliminal level. So that's when I realized there's just so much more to our life experience than the tangible stuff. So that is something I do very often. I also, yeah, for example, in Gudalur, I knew stepping with that space. Varsha had already created a beautiful space with those guys, right? Hence, they were already primed. So when I went in and I kind of did the whole sex education, Besharam, destigmatization, it was like the last straw, and we were just flooded with emotion because they were so comfortable with each other to share and be vulnerable about the worst things that had happened. From one guy saying, "I saw my girlfriend die in an accident. She died in my arms. She just bled to death. And for 3 years, I have felt nothing." And the first time he's talking about it, right? Others talking about abuse that happened when they were children and by the principal in their school, for example, and no teacher helping them out. Them being penalized and thrown out of school for it, right? And of course, the sexual implications. So the really, really strong stories that were coming out, right? But I had to immediately step up and create a space where they could also think. We had already laid the ground saying, holding the anger and the hatred within you is poison. It's like you drink poison and you hope the other person will die. It's not going to work that way, right? And that's
Hmm.
when the whole healing happens. So I had to go back every 2 hours when we had a break. I would go out, sit under a tree, and just breathe because I have to hold it for them, right? And I have to hold it with so much love and so much affection and so much care. and keep that level of care going, be the kind of pillar, so that if they could fall apart, they could fall apart with complete confidence,
Mm.
right? Complete confidence that it won't break them, and there is a way out. There is a way out. It's not, it's sometimes you feel like, if you say going into trance, right? In communities where they believe in trance, when the drum starts beating a particular rhythm, you'll find, especially the women in our community, they go into trance. There's a particular rhythm, and immediately they start going to trance. Why do they go, and why not me? I feel the need to, but I don't feel safe. Whereas they know, they've watched their mothers, they've watched their grandmothers go into trance, they've seen them come out of it. There's certain gestures, the way you hold them, you tie something around their waist, that brings them out of the trance. So they trust the process completely,
Mm.
right? You and I will not fall to trance, even if we feel the need to completely give into the music. You and I will not. And I've sometimes felt it so much that I would cry, but I would not be able to let go, because I don't trust the process. My ancestors, I've not seen my mom do it. I've not seen the women in my family or the community I'm in. I've not seen them go through it from childhood. So in a
Mm.
sense, in that space in Goodlore, I had to be the rock holding, saying that you can fall because you can come out of it. But that means I have to center, and I have to be very permeable. That's what I was talking about. I can't keep a wall. This is my professional space.
Mm.
Then I have a personal space. I have to be completely permeable. That emotion has to flow through me and out. I mean, it's just a metaphor. It's not obviously floating through me. But do you see what I'm saying? I have
Yes.
to be, in a sense, transparent, right? I have to be
Yeah.
there, not negate, and just push out oodles of love,
Mm.
And of course, Varsha being there was just key
Yeah.
to it all. If they have
Yeah.
someone who stays, I leave, right? I
Yeah.
wouldn't have attempted this workshop if I did not trust that Varsha would be able to hold the space once I leave, because some of these
Mm.
implications are far reaching, right? It just doesn't happen in the 3 days. They might want to talk after a week. So I know that they have access to counselors through the NGO, right? And they also have access to a very supportive framework. So normally when we do sex abuse education, I insist that we do teacher training before that. All the teachers, facilitators have to go through the training, because the kids report, the teachers have to be capable of listening. They have to listen with empathy. They have to thank the child rather than saying, why do you
Mm.
go there? Why were you wearing that? I told you, instead of doing that, you have to be like, thank you for telling me, I'm here for you. Can I have your permission to, tell the counselors that you can get this help? We have to do the whole chain of protocol. How do you help the child report?
Yeah. I guess one last question I have for you that I think is very important for me as well is
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to listening, like truly listening to someone when they're sharing something that may have happened to them or they've been had a really hard time with. Something that I personally have a hard time with is sometimes I don't know how to respond. I'm not sure whether the thing I'm going to say is the right thing or the wrong thing, but I really do want to be there for them. In those type of situations, what have you found to be really helpful?
So we do trainings, right? We do trainings of primary caregivers. Like I said, I don't do sex abuse education like CSA, child sex abuse awareness. I don't do it for children without first dealing with at least one group of primary caregivers. For example, in a school, I would do a training with the teachers and only then work with the kids, because you can't
Mm.
leave the kids hanging. I leave, then whom do they talk to? So part of the training for the kids would be, if you have encountered some of this stuff, this is the teacher, who's assigned. And usually it'll be the most empathetic teacher, it'll be the art teacher or the English teacher or the maths teacher, whoever, but it'll be someone that's empathetic. I would have
Mhm.
identified, and she would know the protocol of how to respond. So basically the response, the first and most important thing one needs to do is thank the person for sharing. It's very hard, very, very hard to share, about abuse, sexual abuse, mainly because somehow we feel shame. The person who is a victim feels shame that they kind of asked for it, or they were responsible for it. If they had done this, or if they had worn that, that's very, very common. And also the way society treats, especially women or men who have been, sexually abused. For men, very often men and boys don't report because of the stigma of homosexuality. Most perpetrators are men. I'm not saying all, but the number of perpetrators who are men, the very, very high percentage. So many boys don't report because of the stigma against homosexuality and the shame that I'm a boy, I'm supposed to be strong, and I let this happen to me. So for boys not reporting, there is a different series of reasons, all linked to shame. And for girls not reporting, it's because of modesty. Okay, now I'm no longer a virgin. I am impure. I've lost my virtue. Even the word in Tamil for rape is karpalikardu, which means to lose your virtue,
Wow.
which means sex workers cannot be raped. They don't have virtue. Wives can't be raped by husbands. The wife's virtue lies with the husband, right? Men cannot be raped because men don't have virtue. I mean, that karpu is associated only with women. So it's ridiculous. Even the word for rape in Tamil. So now we have called upon another word to, even in the constitution, they're replacing gendered words to talk about gender abuse and sexual abuse because our language has to support it, right? So for most reasons, people will not report abuse for years sometimes. And when they do, the first thing we need to say is, thank you so much. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for having faith that I would listen, right? So gratitude is a huge practice. And then the second thing we need to do is just listen. What we should not do is provide solutions, not immediately at least. Because what kicks in when I do trainings for teachers and for mothers, it's terrible. Immediately they jump in with, why did you go there? Oh my God, what happened? Why didn't you tell me before? And the person feels attacked. Why didn't I say it before? It means, did I consent? Why did I go there? Did I consent? Everything. But the why is the mother or the teacher doing it? Because of their own feeling of guilt. I somehow let my child get abused. In that sense of guilt, we want to blame the child. We want to shift the blame,
Mm.
right? So that is what moms and teachers do very often, and we have even facilitators. And I have to, when we do role plays, and I have to break them of the habit. I'm like, no, do not respond in that way. Please do not. Do not respond with questions. Listen, thank and listen, thank and listen. And very often after the fourth role play, the fourth person is still doing the same thing. I told you, Ma, why did you go there? Even everyone is trying to shift the blame or trying to find out a reason why. Humans want to know why something happened. Sometimes the reason why is because the other person is an asshole. He is an abuser who has a pattern of behavior that preys off people. But nobody wants to say that. They want to find a series of circumstances that could have been changed for this not to have happened. You should never do that. That's one big no-no. The second big no-no, which happens among friends, not so much, you're not older, you're usually a peer. Friends is you want to say, don't worry, I'll take care of it. Or shall we go and do this? Shall we go and do that? Don't offer solutions. That person right now first needs someone to listen. And having opened up for the first time, it's very scary if you say, oh my God, we have to go tell the principal now, or we have to go and report this to the police. You have just stepped out of your comfort zone. You don't want to go tell some random person about it. Maybe after listening to more, you can gently suggest, do you trust me enough that we can go talk to a counselor? See how you can help that person to report it if they want to. Very often they don't want to. They just want the solace of sharing with you, right? So, and don't ever make promises like, don't worry, I'll take care of it now. You cannot make such promises. Nobody can assure it, right? How
Mm.
can I take on the responsibility if they're still with the abuser? I can try. If they allow me, if the child comes to me and says, you know what, this is happening with my dad, I can't say, oh my God, okay, I'll take care of it. How? I am an external facilitator. I need to get the child's permission. I need to go to the teacher. I have to convince the teacher then to approach the family. And then the mother has to be convinced the dad is really doing this. It's a huge process. So don't make false promises and don't try to find instant solutions, because why we do that again is for ourselves. We are trying to soothe our suffering. We are so sad that this happened that we immediately want to stop our suffering.
Mm.
That's where the trigger is coming from, right? But we need to stop that. We need to listen and ask them, what do you think you need? What can I do for you? And then slowly see if it's possible to go and report it to authorities, guide them towards it, but not immediately jump up and down and put that negative energy on them.
Mm.
I don't know if what I'm saying is making sense. And of
Yes.
course, everybody does something different, right? Like different people report in different ways. Someone might just want that one nudge to go and report, and that's great. But very often, people just need to be heard first, and for quite a while before they have the courage to then, go into how do we fix this more.
Wow. I feel like I could just keep asking you questions and talking to you for days and days and days. I mean, I think that's one of the most beautiful things about having lived such unique experiences. I mean, the spaces that you've worked in and the people that you've worked with, I feel like has given you such introspective, understandings of people and in suffering, and because of that, I feel like it's endless. I mean, this would be very different if you were, for example, a professor who studied suffering by reading and doing research. I mean, right? I mean, it's the lived experience, I think, allows somebody to have so much more wisdom that they can then share that someone who just did it by reading or research can't. And so I think that's why I'm like, wow, this was a 1 hour conversation and there's still at least 100 more. And so I would definitely love to have you on again in a few months or whenever the time allows for it. Because I mean, there is so much more that I would love to understand about your perspective. And because I think this connection of suffering, alleviating suffering for the self and for others, and being able to then channel that through activities, whether it's dancing, whether it's singing, whether it's your own work, whether it's, whatever it is the crux and fundamental foundation of all education. I mean, I think that is what most of human development is striving towards to do, right? To alleviate whatever suffering they feel and to find something worthwhile to do to channel that energy instead. I mean, I think most of human behavior and activities channeled through that. And so, I mean, I think we're touching on some of the most important topics when it comes to education. And I think you have such a refreshing perspective. And I'm very happy I was able to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gautam. I had a lovely time talking to you. Sometimes talking also helps me clarify so much in my head. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of our conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you again for listening and making this process so much more enjoyable. If you haven't had the chance to already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts to get the latest updates on new episodes. If you've been learning useful information here, feel free to leave a review as well. A little bit goes a long way in spreading this podcast. And have a wonderful day. And as per usual, stay re-educated.